I've been doing a bit of research, so welcome to my channel and you can get to benefit from it. I did a video recently about muddy sound on tapes and the fact that BASF ones tend to be having a muddy sound on Japanese cassette decks. Well, is that true or is that not? Let's look into this a bit deeper and we'll give you the answer at the end. Well, give you an answer, and if you've got anything you'd like to say about it, put it in the comments. And we'll see where we go. But here we go. This is the sort of things that we're going to find out. So, first question. What does a hi-fi system do when you switch it on? Second, is there a problem with the volumes? Thirdly, is there a problem with the sound? Fourthly, okay, having got all that out of the way, where does that leave us with the muddy sound from a tape, etc.? And why would that be a problem? And lastly, what can we do to correct all these problems? You never know, there might even be a switch for it. Let's get stuck in. Well, first of all, I've been looking around and I've found some charts, and somebody's bothered making them, so it's only courtesy to at least give them a quick glance. And we don't need to go into the full details of it, but if it says something, well, maybe we ought to take notice of it. It's better than just guesswork, isn't it? And then we'll go from there. If your hi-fi looks like this, it's going to take a while to warm up. It's going to take at least 10 minutes before you can say it's fully heated up. There will be people shouting now, no, I can use it much quicker than that. I didn't say you couldn't use it. I said 10 minutes to be fully warmed up. Those are big lumps of metal in those transformers. If they're not to heat, you're not getting the full performance out of them as they should be. If you've got something like this, it'll be up and running very quickly, but it's still going to take 10 minutes to warm up. And the same with this. Although this is vintage, it hasn't got tubes in it, the lumps of metal still need to get up to heat. What I'm getting at here is that if you're going to do any sort of subjective testing or recording or playing back, you've got to make sure that your equipment is warmed up. I would normally switch it on half an hour before I want to use it, just to make sure that everything's up and running. And with a thing like a tape deck, you've got to worry about the fact that half the circuitry isn't used when it's just sat there. So you've got to give it a few seconds even when you're up and running. So you put it in record pause and then let it sit for maybe a minute before you do anything subjective. Volume problems, unless you're one of the very few people that actually turns the volume right the way down every time you switch your amplifier off, then you're going to find that when you switch it on, it's at a different level to what you want. It's either going to be too loud, too quiet, or somewhere in between, but it's not going to be exactly where you want it. So you're going to twiddle with the knob, which is fine, but it doesn't mean that you haven't got a level in your head that is actually constant or set. So any subjective tests you do now, you've got to give yourself a little bit of time to settle into the volume level that you're listening to, because volume makes a difference, and we're going to cover that. So volume makes a difference, remember that bit. If you think about it, the chances of your amplifier and system and everything working straight off as soon as you push the button, it's very, very slight. So you're going to get weird sounds. You're going to get humming, you're going to get hissing, you're going to get various other noises which may or may not settle down. Normally they do settle down, but you've got to give them a chance. And that's part of the warm-up thing. Part of the secret of the warm-up is to get rid of some of the sounds like the humming, but also you've just got to give it a chance for everything to kick in, because not everything's going to be ready at the same time. Yeah, if you're old enough to remember CRT televisions, the type with the big glass bottles in them, not valves, but the tube, you'll remember that when they started doing, well, originally you used to switch them on and wait 10 minutes for them to come on before you got a picture. That was the old days with valves. Then you had the type with transistors, which you used to switch on and wait 5 minutes for them to come on. And they would sort of really, it looked like they really struggled to get up out of whatever it was they were hiding in, but they would eventually come on and you get a picture that was a bit sort of, ugh. And then they brought out the instant start ones, which were pretty good. I mean, I used to work on them a bit, and they were all right. You'd switch them on, and they'd go zing, and then within 2 or 3 seconds there'd be a picture. But it wasn't a good picture. It was a picture, and it might have been in colour. Wasn't necessarily the right colour, and I'm not talking about NTSC. I'm talking about any sort of colour. They'd come up, and they'd be bleary, and they'd be sort of washed out, and they'd be sort of, well, nasty. But give them, I mean, Hitachis were fairly famous. They'd come up and they'd have a green cast to them. And 5 minutes later or so, it'd be okay. But if you ever turned it off and then turned it back on again for a while, you'd have a green cast again. And it was quite noticeable. And that was all down to the fact it had to warm up and everything had to be at the right operating temperature. If anything was out of sync, if anything was not as warm as it should be when it was set up, then you would have a problem, and that's what I'm talking about here. Give your stereo system a decent chance to get going. Warm it up first, give it a go. If your stereo system has tubes, valves, then you'll find that when it switches on, it'll possibly wait for a while and then it go click and then you'll be straight into sound. But if it's one of the older type, it'll bring the sound in gently, along with the hums and things as we discussed before. But this is the important thing. It will get there and it will sound good. However, if you alter the volume, it will sound different. And this is where we start getting this muddy sound problem. If you only hear it from where it comes from, then it sounds okay. If you turn it up a bit, it's going to sound clearer. There's a reason for that, and I'll show you what that is. It's the famous Fletcher-Munson curve. Everybody knows about the Fletcher-Munson curve, don't you? Well, you've all used it, but you probably don't know what it is. But I'm not going to bore you with it to the nth degree, other than to say that it's a thing. It isn't just something they've made up. It is actually a thing. And I'll explain to you what that thing is now in as short a way as possible. Essentially, these two guys worked out that the human ear does not respond exactly the same at different levels. It has different frequency responses. It responds better at higher levels to high frequencies and low frequencies than it does at low levels. So what actually happens is they monitored it, they drew curves, and they worked out exactly what it should be. But what it makes a difference to you and I is that whatever you set your tone controls to, if you listen to it quietly, when you turn it up, it's going to sound wrong. Normally it sounds too bright. And that is why we get the muddy sound problem, because if you've got a sound and it's coming out at a certain level, if you try and play something that sounds very similar to it at a slightly lower level, it will sound muddy in comparison. So if you've got a tape that is not producing the sound at the same level as a different tape or the sound source, when you listen to it, it will sound muddy. And unless you turn it up to be exactly the same level, you won't know. But if you can't get the tape to be at the same level, it will always sound muddy. But only until you play it back properly, and then you turn the volume to the way you want it. And then, hey presto, you've got yourself an unmuddy tape. Whatever brand it is, it will be correct when you've set it up to play back at the volume you like it, not the volume that the monitor was giving you. And that's where this rumour for tapes being muddy comes from. It's these people with these 3-head decks that are playing the back saying, oh look, that's muddy because it's playing back 2 or 3 dB lower. And if you look at that curve properly, you'll see that that's enough to make it sound muddy. Those 3 bits of tunes were actually only 3 dB different, but as you could hear, they made a hell of a difference to the brightness. One of the problems with today's plug-and-play age is that everything is it's all set up. You buy a box, you plug it in. If it's one of these things like a smart speaker, you just tell it what you want to do, and then it says, do you want to alter the sound? And you say yes, and it just fiddles with it. And most of the settings nowadays are automatic. So if you've got something like that, when you turn the volume up, it will adjust everything that should keep it sounding right, which is great, but it doesn't actually help when you come to this stuff that we're talking about here. Proper hi-fi, proper doing it the way it used to be done, because when we used to be going out and buying our stuff in the 70s and the 80s, which is when hi-fi first really started to take off, people had to know what they were doing, they had to know what they were buying. It cost a lot of money. It cost several weeks' wages to buy this equipment, and then you had to make it sound good, and you had to use it, and you had to know how to use it, which was what we used to read magazines for. Things like hi-fi and all that sort of stuff. They used to tell you how to set stuff up and what to expect from it. So, kind of long story short, we knew how to set this stuff up, but the modern people, the people that are telling you how to do it nowadays, a lot of them haven't. I mean, anybody who was not actually in their adulthood in the 70s and 80s, it's all just hearsay. And this is where we get a problem with things like muddy sound, because people just don't understand. I mean, you've got your iPhone, you plug it in, you switch it on, it sounds good. Simple. That's not how it works with a cassette deck or with a proper audiophile amplifier and turntable. You've got to set things up. We've all heard of the loudness wars. Well, this is some of the casualties of the loudness wars. So what you used to have in the old days was an amplifier like this. And you can see on here, there is a knob. Actually, there are several. You've got a bass, middle and treble, but you've got over there to the left-hand side a loudness, and that's the important one here. So that's a loudness button, but on this one, we've got a loudness knob. This is the same manufacturer, but a different amplifier, and again, we've got a loudness knob. Let's go real up to date now. This AOA has got a loudness button, and this is the specification. You can see here it says loudness control for audio EQ enhancement and nighttime. Then it's also got one called direct, which actually takes all the EQ off. Now, what would you use that for? Well, that's another story, not for this video. Well, the purpose of this video was to try and show people that things aren't all as simple as they seem, but they're not that complicated either. You just have to know what you're doing. And hopefully you've got something out of this video, in which case, please click on the like and subscribe. Need some more subscribers, need some more likers, that'd be good. Anyway, or if you've got some questions, please put questions in the comments and I'll get back to you with answers, and if not, I'll point you in the direction for where you can find the answers. One way or another, we can make this life a lot simpler and get much more enjoyment out of it just by doing it. Let's keep it simple. Anyway, like, subscribe, catch you another time. Bye.